Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 308. I'm Andrew Coates, and I'm the host of the Live Free and Diet Hard podcast. And I'm bringing back guest number one, all-time first guest, Dean Somerset. If you don't know who he is, I have I have nothing to say to you, but he's actually been one of my most frequent guests over the years. And when me and Dean Guido had the old version of the podcast, and you are someone who has been a major role model for me in what I've been able to accomplish in my career. I've always looked up to what you've done. I've felt you blazed the path. So I always pay close attention to what you're working on. And unlike big generation of coaches who built, see, let's go this way. Unlike many of your generation of coaches who built worldwide authority, you've spoken all over the world, very, very well known as an educator. You were an early adopter in online training as well. You've essentially been a full-time in-person trainer this whole time, probably doing more sessions than most other full-time in-person trainers with everything else. So is that something that you do eventually want to scale down, or is it something it's so important and fundamental to you? And then we'll talk about some of the things you're working on.
First off, I think we should acknowledge 308 episodes of a podcast. What the hell, man? That's like Tim Ferriss numbers.
Oh,
Get up there into like you either are like a glutton for punishment on this, or it's something that really lights your candle, man. That's awesome. Congrats to you on being able to do that. Um, so back to the question, like being able to do in-person clients. COVID taught me a lot of different things about who I am, what I want to do, and what my business is able to tolerate. And one of the biggest things is that going to the gym and working with people, that fills my cup. That's something I actually enjoy doing. It hasn't changed in 20 years, and I don't see it changing in the next 20 years. So for me, being able to get out of the house and go and focus with people, make those meaningful connections, make those strong relationships, and see people actually making progress is better than working with 1,000 people on a $9 a month membership site, because I can actually see people in person and do that work. Throughout the pandemic, it was virtual sessions, which are their own challenges and their own benefits and not. So I found that with that, just staying at home and looking at a computer screen, it didn't do it for me. And I want to be able to make my business something that makes me happy. It's something that, yeah, the money could be there if I wanted to do different things, but I don't like sitting and staring at a computer screen all day long. I can do that for 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes at a shot, and then I want to get up and move around and go do something. So in a long answer turned into a short answer, no, I don't see that changing in the future. I just like being able to have the ability to step out and do a side project, or record a new podcast with yourself, or be able to create a mentorship program, or teach a workshop in Australia, or do stuff like that that can help me to kind of break up the consistency, but give me a chance to be able to stretch myself and test myself into different ways.
so you mentioned the mentorship. So
Yeah.
this is actually why I want to pull you on here because I will preface by saying this. I'll ask one more question first. Do you find that because you work with so many people in person, you're always coaching, that it's one of the keys to your idea creativity?
Heard that. I mean, obviously it's a major feeder system, but also I do pay attention to what the industry is going through. And I always kind of pride myself in being able to see where the gaps in service are in a marketplace. So being able to see that, yeah, there's a huge opportunity for creating an independent trainer mentorship, because most of the programs out there that focus on business are focused on here's how to open up your own gym, or here's how to expand online coaching. There's very few out there that can teach a trainer like myself or like you who work out of a facility and don't have any aspirations to own a gym, what to actually do to improve your business, how to offer different services. So if you're an independent trainer, you are the key man or key woman of your business. There is nobody else who's really going to replace who you are and what you do. You're a service provider. You can have ancillary services. That's fantastic. But knowing how to actually run a business is something that very few trainers are actually shown how to do and have next to no training in. And I know this because I've actually taught the courses that have certified trainers, from CanFit Pro to being involved with U of A and being involved with Nate and being involved with a couple of different certification organizations. When they talk about business, it's here's the sales script and that's it. They don't dig into things like here's how to analyze your profit and loss statement. Here's what actual marketing looks like. Here's how to create a business plan. Here's why all of this stuff is important. And being able to relay that to a trainer in a way that they understand so that their eyes don't gloss over and go to 1,000-yard stare and just want to get out of the conversation is kind of a big deal, because that's something that all businesses need to know. And successful businesses have down pat. If you're a trainer, you are a successful business one way or another. Knowing those numbers can make you better at what you do than not knowing. So a good way that I analogize it is if you're a trainer and you work on a training program, you have a plan, you have periodization, you track metrics of that training program. Your business is a training plan. Your business has metrics that you want to track to know whether or not you're growing, you're shrinking, you're paying attention to the stuff that needs to be paid attention to, and you're actually seeing the result you're looking for.
How do you get the coach who comforts himself and feels productive, but continues to go and do more biomechanics, more training? And we know, like, you teach that stuff. We know that stuff's valuable. But how do you grab that person by the collar and say, listen, you're good enough at that. That's not what's going to move the needle on your career success anymore. How do you get through to that person? And you said a few of the things, but what are the gaps? What matters for long-term sustainability?
Well, interestingly, I did a poll on Instagram a couple of months ago, and I just asked trainers, it's like, what do you struggle with the most? Is it the programming? Is it coaching? Is it sales and marketing? Is it getting new clients? And more than 80% said sales and marketing, getting new clients. So most trainers don't struggle with biomechanics. So taking the same courses to reaffirm the same things that you already know and do well doesn't get you further ahead. How do you get a client in front of you to put all those things into action to actually see the result you're looking for? Another big thing that I'll usually recommend to clients is like, okay, well, whatever your revenue is now, would your business change or would you be able to help more people if your revenue expanded by 30%? That would probably help you expand and generate more of an impact. You would be able to work with more clients in that 30% increased revenue. You would probably be able to bring on more specialized equipment. You would probably be able to offer more specialized services and use the stuff that you're thinking about. Is there something that you want to buy that would help your clients in a tremendous way? Maybe it's force plates, maybe it's a new testing scenario, maybe it's some other measurement tool that you really have your eye on, but you just don't have the money for it. Well, imagine if you had the money for it and then be able to do stuff from it, but you were able to get that from knowing what your business is supposed to do and then generate a plan around it so that you can actually put that stuff into use. Knowing the biomechanics information is fantastic, and I recommend everyone do it, but that's not where trainers struggle. Getting more clients is kind of the meat and potatoes of the industry. And if I'm able to say, yeah, let's move whatever you're making right now and throw another 30, 40, 50, 70, 90, 150% revenue gain on whatever it is that you're doing, maybe you can do some really cool stuff out of that.
Something else that I alluded to earlier, but I think is fundamental. I've noticed, because there is a big push for business mentorships in the industry more than ever. I've gone to a bunch of conferences that are built around it. And I noticed that the buzzword is scale. And I think there's a lot of excitement and pressure to scale business. But what I've seen now, a lot of the coaches who built 7-figure businesses that come with 7-figure revenue and 7-figure headaches,
Mhm.
and their margins don't even, their margins are smaller than guys like you and me. And we're still on different levels, but who are punching full time in person. And I personally think, I mean, maybe it's a bias that keeps me where I am, that training in person is a really good safety net. It's a really good base to then grow what you're interested in from there. Thoughts?
Absolutely. And if that's something that fills your cup, let it go. If it's something where you're an introvert and you love fitness, but you hate the face to face and you hate trying to make small talk and you hate trying to establish relationships, I get it. Scaling a business and creating an online service might be the best way for you to get the best out of your business that you see possible. Fantastic. Go for it. For some people, they get more out of that face to face relationship. So that's where they should be. Now, the cool thing about the fitness industry is there's so many different ways that you can be successful, and also so many different ways that you can make a tangible difference. Look at people that run primarily YouTube-based content. They can make a massive, massive dent in the universe by doing really cool things through video content, and they don't have to see a single person in their day-to-day life. And if that's something that makes them happy, makes them successful, and makes an impact in the world, fantastic. There's people that run really successful online coaching programs like Jordan Syatt. His inner circle membership is incredible the way he's got it set up. And he's actually recommended clients to me who needed more specific training and more specific follow-up, which is great to be able to be a part of that resource. And then there's individuals who want to be in the gym full time doing really cool things. Look at like Luka Hosevar. He's run a fantastic facility and he is hands-on every day training clients. He's got probably 50 million different irons in the fire any given day. But that's the cool part about this is you don't have to just say, I am only this, I am only that. He does so many different things and does all of them surprisingly well, which you don't see on a regular basis. He's one of those unicorns in the industry that definitely I keep an eye on just because he does so many cool things that I'm like, okay, he's doing that. I want to see what I can do. And it's really cool to be able to see how he spends like 99% of his waking hours. I don't think he sleeps. Like he's incredible. He's just a robot.
So he's actually getting better at sleep now. He has also given up energy drinks. So Luca and I have probably spent more time together at events. We've spoken at a bunch in the last year and a half than anybody else I've hung out with in my travels. And I get to see it kind of up close and it's inspiring. I think he's great. He's clear on what he wants to do. He knows what he loves. He's fueled by it. And like a quote you said at our conference last year. You said that I can't actually remember the exact quote, but you made a quote about burnout. And the point being is that you're just not going to burn out if you're doing things that you love.
Yeah. I mean, how often has somebody worked on a passion project where they said, okay, this is too much. I got to step away from this? Once in a while, it might happen. But if you're really passionate about what you do and that drives you, you'll never have enough time and never have enough energy to spend on it. Like I know clients who are like so passionate about mountain biking and gravel biking that they want to quit their job and just do that full time if they had the money for it, because they can spend weeks riding a bike up and down a hill. So if that's what makes them happy, that's what makes them happy. They will never find enough hours in the day to do that. If your career turns into a passion project because you do things that really fires you up and makes you interested in going to work every single day, that's the best scenario. If you wake up every morning and you dread going to work, you might not be in the right situation. That doesn't mean that what you do is bad. It just means that you need to think about what your context is and think about what can I do to make this different, to spark that fire underneath me. If you're bored of counting reps in a one-on-one scenario, start doing some semi-private stuff, start doing a boot camp, start doing online coaching, start doing content creation, start doing something different, and just see what kind of spark that might create in you. But there's no limit on what you can actually do in the fitness industry. Now, yeah, there might be some limit based on your environment. If you work in a certain gym or a certain company and they're like, we will only allow you to do these things in this gym, cool. That's their rules. They have the control, they have the authority. If you don't like it, you can go elsewhere and do something different. It doesn't mean that you can't do that kind of stuff, but if you're playing in my house, you follow my rules. I totally understand it. But that doesn't mean that it's a limitation on what you can do if you leave. Now, that doesn't mean to leave any scenario if it's a good scenario for you, but you just have to know what's available out there and what fills your needs.
Let's actually go deeper there because I was thinking about this. You and I both came out of the same organization, same system, and a lot of what helped me was the fact I was able to do continuing education with you. Uh, you were given a lot of latitude to build a brand, grow, your blog, your online coaching, what have you. And we both stayed there for a long time. You were longer than me. Now we're both contractors under a different umbrella, which also serves us really well. What would you say to coaches about making sure they're in the right scenario? And what are some red flags to say, even if it was scary, you got to get away?
The biggest thing is like if it's the right scenario, you know, it pays you well. You get into a good scenario where you have freedom to do what you want. You feel like you don't have to get micromanaged all the time, but you feel like you have the support to do things really well. You can go to management and say, hey, I want to do this. I have this thing going. I want to try to do this more. I want to branch out into this. I want to go to this event. I want to offer this. What kind of things are available to allow that to happen? And they'll have answers for you. It won't just be a blanket no. If it is a blanket no, cool, that's fine, but it might not be allowing you to grow the way you would want to. And that just means, okay, well, what are other options out there for me? So if you are deciding that, this place just isn't fitting for me, it usually has to come down to a couple of key things. First, you don't have the ability to financially grow past where you currently are. You're being stifled as far as creativity or growth or engagement or something that you really want to do, and they're just putting a hard no on it, or they're trying to take credit for it or trying to take over ownership of that. So if you go to an organization and they say, if you do anything outside of here, then we own the rights to that. I know that years ago, Disney animators had something similar where if they created anything during the tenure of when they were employed by Disney, Disney owned their entire rights towards that. So that is something that, yeah, it might be like various legalities around that content creation, stuff like that. So if you do have an organization where they're like, yeah, we own everything that you put up, that might affect how you create other things. So if that's the case and you want to be creative and move out and do different organization or different projects or whatever you need, then you might need to leave that organization to begin with. It's going to be scary, it's going to be hard, but it's probably going to be something that leads towards greater things down the road, especially if you really believe in and are passionate about what you're trying to do.
Okay, I like that. And again, we were really blessed and we had a really awesome environment. You really embraced the brand development within. I didn't really lean into that until I'd left, but opportunities started presenting themselves, and that's actually worked out pretty well. Okay, so next thought. You do a tremendous amount to give back to the industry, right? And I think that obviously you've been exceptional at creating vehicles that have earned you revenue, but a lot of what you've done has not had ooh, here's the calculable ROI, immediate payoff on what I've been putting out, starting with the old articles, various forms of media. To what degree is that just because, hey, this industry has given me a life I couldn't have dreamt of? Because that's kind of how I feel. And what are some of the metrics, the filters that you make decisions through when it comes to, okay, this has to also be make financial sense?
Yeah. There's a quote that I really love that says that the most altruistic thing you can do is plant a seed for a tree that you'll never see grow and that you'll never sit under the shade of. So sometimes you have to do things knowing that the long-term benefit is going to outweigh the short-term gain just because the benefit is so great. So if I'm planting seeds in the industry in one way or another, and I'm not going to say that I'm like a trendsetter changer or anything like that, but I'm just hoping to make a dent in the universe and come up with things that may benefit enough people to maybe make a bigger dent down the road. It's something that sometimes you do things and hope to break even on it just because of the experience, just because it's something new that you might enjoy. My blog, when I first started it, all came from a client saying, "Oh, you should write a blog." Because he was writing a blog, and I thought, yeah, maybe I should. It was a creative outlet more than anything else. And it was just a way to put words in front of a screen and be able to put something up that somebody else might read and be able to take a bit of either enjoyment or information from. Sometimes, just like this podcast, you probably don't have a huge return on investment from it directly. Like, I don't think you monetize your
No,
podcast, but
not
it
at all.
leads yeah, but it leads to things. It leads to something else down the road. So how many speaking engagements, how many writing engagements, how many industry connections have you made where those have led to something really big down the road? You can't always measure a return on investment just by dollars and cents directly. Sometimes it's a reputational thing. Sometimes it's an experiential thing. Sometimes you just develop a connection that eventually turns into something that really leads you where you want to go. But you don't know what any of that is going to be until you actually put it out there and give it a try. So if you're a trainer listening to this or anybody listening to this who's wondering about, oh, how much is this going to cost? How much is it going to lead to? Sometimes the experience is worth more than the cost by itself. So if you go to a live event just to listen to whoever's presenting, you're probably only going to get about 20% of the value out of that live event. Going and actually talking to people in sidebar conversations, going to the social events, meeting people saying, "Hi, my name is so and so. I work in whatever in this. I really love what you do and what you're doing." That could lead to a whole bunch of new opportunities. I know I've gotten publishing opportunities because I've met editors and publishers on sidebar conversations who said, "Oh, you're Dean. I've read your blog. It's awesome. We should do this." So I got in front of them and created front of mind thought process, which led to things down the road.
My experience has been identical to that, whether it's a guest on a podcast like T Nation happened because I saw Danny Sugard interacting with someone on Facebook. And I said, oh shit, I've been reading Danny for years. So I sent her a message and a friend request and said, we have a podcast. I'd love to have you on. She was excited. She started looking at my media and listening to the podcast and checking out my website, which I'd already been writing for. And then a few weeks after the episode, she turned around and said, hey, would you consider, she was very sheepish as if she expected me to say no. And she asked, hey, would you consider coming to write for us at T Nation? I've been reading T Nation every morning for years. Dream come true. Blew the doors open on stuff. Then Sam Pogue set me up with True Coach when he was the vice president there. And then Generation Iron were in my inbox. And then it just became easy from there where people just wanted to introduce me to the various different things. So you can only connect the dots backwards. But recently I've been enjoying the phrase thinking in terms of the surface area of luck. I heard Alex Hormozy say it as well. And it's what you described. It's putting yourself in as many rooms, physically, virtually as possible, showing up to support other people. It's really just another way of saying that you create your own luck because you take the long game, you're abundant in your mindset, and you also have to lean into the skills. Let's talk about that for a second. What's your philosophy towards skill development as opportunities present themselves to you?
Well, every opportunity is just a new data point. So it's something that may or may not hit. It may or may not be a good idea. It may or may not be a great experience, but it's just data at the end of the day. So there's going to be times where you do things consistently with no real return on anything. Like, how many episodes did you put out of this podcast before you actually got listeners? Probably like 10 or 20 or 50. And now you've just established yourself with a good range. And there's going to be times where you have certain guests on where views go really high. There's going to be points of contact that, or points of content that you have that blow the doors off of everything out there. And it might lead to 100 or 1,000 new followers. It might lead to new opportunities. But then there's also going to be content that barely does anything. It barely performs. It doesn't do what you want it to do. It's just data. That doesn't mean it's good or bad or other. If you have a new connection that you make who leads to massive business opportunities, great. But you might also have new contents or new contacts that lead absolutely nowhere. That doesn't mean that you give them nothing. That just means that you give them your absolute best to every situation that you can. I've had lots of clients come from people who saw what I was doing and referred all of their friends, all of their family to me, even though that individual bought no sessions from me and never spent a minute training with me. But they just said, yeah, Dean's great at what he does. You should go see him. And they just saw me from afar and did whatever. I've had people who have seen my work online or seen my social media or something like that and said, yeah, I want to train with this guy directly. This piece really stood out to me. I want him to fix this. Okay, cool. So you never know what's going to hit with the individual, and you never know which contacts are going to be really huge. All you can do is just be present, be authentic, and be willing to give everything of yourself to every scenario that you can possibly find. Return on investment should be the last thing you consider with a lot of those considerations, because then you're just chasing dollars and you're not making sense. See what I did there? Money puns.
The first event I ever traveled to, the Kansas City Fitness Summit 2017, you spoke. Our friend Hannah Gray went down with us. I didn't know anybody else. I met well over 100 people, made great connections at that event. And I met Pete Dupuis and I met a lot of the other like speaker tier. But two of the most valuable friends that I made that created opportunities for me later were two other attendees that, as far as the industry goes, are very low key and nondescript. Tim Arndt, who hosted his own conference. I started going to it. After showing up a couple of years, he turned around and asked me to be a speaker, my first speaking engagement, which blew the doors open on it. And then Jeff Aker, he just stepped down. He'd been the NSCA provincial director here in Alberta for years. Quiet guy, very just awesome human being for two other people, and started showing up at his event. And sure enough, he had also invited me to speak. And if you go in, I see a lot of people, they only spend their energy trying to curry the favor of the quote speaker tier. Now, the best relationships you'll often get are the people who are on the same journey you are at these events. It's still why I still show up to them and attend, in addition to the ones I get to speak at, I still show up to attend stuff.
Absolutely. And that's how I got started speaking at the KC Fitness Summit too, is I just paid for a ticket and showed up one day. And Lou Schuler, when he was emceeing, he asked a question. And it's like, who's doing this or that? And I put my hand up in the back and he's like, oh, Dean Somerset's here. He came all the way from Canada. I made a point of saying he's got all these things going on, but he still shows up. And then I think it was actually Brett Contreras who's like, you need to speak at this next year. These other two presenters didn't know what they're talking about, but you actually do. You should do this. So that got me into the situation of being able to speak at it just by showing up. And then I think it was the first year that I did, my presentation was voted as the best of the weekend, which pissed everyone off who was really a seasoned presenter. But I did it by giving things away and having really attractive models show up to demonstrate everything. So that makes it a little bit easier. But man, that first year that you went to the Kansas City Fitness Summit, that one was such a goat rodeo because my flight was delayed so hard and I wound up missing the first day. Like, me and James Fell wound up having to get a hotel room together. New York Times bestseller, James Fell. If you ever get a chance, read some of his stuff. The guy, he cannot stop talking. For a guy who's an author who doesn't spend time with people, you can tell because he just does not shut up. So going out to dinner with him, I think I said 5 words the entire night, and he was just telling me about how great and awesome he was. But then I got down there early somehow because you flew through like Chicago or Denver or whatever. I flew through Toronto like an idiot because Toronto is just the pit of hell when it comes to transfers for anything. But it was funny because I was trying to get you and be like, oh yeah, there's a speaker's dinner over here. I'm going to invite you and bring you. But then I didn't show up. But man, when I did show up there, you were like a kid in a candy store. You were like so starstruck seeing everyone. I'm like, oh yeah, that's just Brett. That's just Alan Aragon. What a guy. And, then that's just this guy over here. Oh, Spencer, he's still sober. That's kind of cool. But yeah, it was hilarious watching you be like the kid in the candy store, all starstruck, and now you're like the big deal. That's
It,
awesome.
it's a weird thing. I do like in presentations, I do like showing people, listen, I remember very vividly um, thinking, I'm the trainer on the floor. I'm reading T Nation for years. I'm following Jonathan Goodman's blog, the PGDC, various other people in the industry. And I start traveling to stuff, and I'm listening to all these people on podcasts. And I knew because of the organization we work for. And I didn't understand or see any pathway. I thought it was okay, there's all this us trainers, gym floor, regular trainers, and then here's this like elite tier of educators and authorities. And there's no pathway in between them. But along the way, now I've been trying to show everybody here's actually the path. Here's all the things I did. Here are the opportunities as they presented themselves. And yes, it is weird to look around and stand next to some of the people I've gotten to speak at events with, whether it's a Lane Norton or a Jordan Syatt or a Don Saladino or a Molly Galbraith. And it has been really rewarding. But when it really comes down to it, most of them are still actually just like the rest of us. The trainer who still loves training, like you mentioned, Luca, Lee Boyce is a great example of this. Lee just still loves to train people in person. It's been a fun ride. So now that you are so much further along in your career, how do you get more asks and opportunities than you could possibly ever say yes to? What are your value systems and decision-making criteria when you say yes or no to something? And then I want to talk about your book. We got to talk about the book too.
Part of it is it an interesting offer. So during the pandemic, I had a couple of opportunities to work with a couple of Fortune 500 companies on some projects that they had going. I can't talk about them. They made me sign NDAs, but I can say that you've probably used the products that I've worked on. So that's about as far as I can say. But they presented unique opportunities and they were financially good, but at the same time, it was more of, is this a yes or is this a no? If it's not a hell yes, then it's probably a no. If you get an opportunity to do something you're not comfortable with, or that you're like, oh, this is going to be way outside of what my scope or realm is, that's probably a no. If it's something that gives you a unique opportunity or experience, and it's something that you can jump into and dive into, and that's really going to fill your cup, fantastic. So I've been able to do a couple of workshops where I presented for organizations where I've traveled, which is great, love it, but it does present a different dynamic than if I teach that workshop on my own and run things into my own calendar and that kind of stuff. So for most of the time, it's about finding out what your scenario is, what your situation is, but then also making sure that expectations are clearly outlined. If you say, I want to do this, 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 and this, and whoever you're working with is like, yep, cool, go for it. That's great. If they say, I want you to write about postmenopausal women and how their hormone fluctuation changes as they exercise, I'm thinking, well, you know what, I could, but yeah, but there's probably people out there who have written the certification that are better at that kind of stuff than me. So I'd pass it on to them because they can do it better justice. It doesn't mean that I can't talk about it. It just means that I got to know where my strengths and my weaknesses are. And like if I want to have somebody have a discussion about Olympic weightlifting, I'm going to tag in Hannah Gray because she's the certified coach. I'm not. I can work with people who are Olympic weightlifters to help them improve some biomechanical stuff, work through some common injuries and mechanisms. But if they want to learn the coaching inside and out, they're going to go to her. So it's knowing about what you're good at, what you're willing to do, what lights your fire, and then being able to find people around you who could do the job being asked in a better way that doesn't take anything away from you.
Okay. Is there anything that you now have to say no to that you used to value because of the amount of time that you're directing into the projects you're committed to?
Podcasts.
Yeah, fair.
Like this is something that a couple of years ago when podcasts were becoming like the medium of choice for everyone and their dog podcast, it was at a point where I was trying to go through 2 or 3 a week. And it was getting to the point where it was like, look, I'm losing time from my family, my wife and my dogs, losing time from my actual work, from the side projects. And the return on investment on this is like maybe 5 people are viewing the content. And a lot of the podcasters were asking the exact same questions. Like, what's your origin story? What exercises do you like? If you had to do one exercise on a deserted island, what would it be? I'd be doing a boat build. That would be my exercise. Get me off the island. First, I live in Alberta. What the hell am I doing on a deserted island? How did that come about? There's more backstory there about everything than about what exercise I would like to do. So it got to the point where it was just redundant, more of a time suck and less of a benefit overall. And now I'm at the point where it's not necessarily a return on investment being financial. It's about return on investment being time, energy, and other stuff that I want to do. There's only so many hours in a day. And if I want to spend my time doing things that are going to benefit one person or benefit 5 people or 50 people, or maybe it's stuff that I want to benefit me only. So if I have 20 minutes and I can go for a run or I can do a podcast interview, I'm going to go for a run instead. So it comes down to where are the values most beneficial. I do this one because I love you and because you're awesome and because, we're local. So at the same time, it's something that we can kind of schedule in really easily.
Well, the feeling's mutual, and something that anybody who's interacted with me on a one-on-one basis, DMs, in-person events, one of my favorite things is to share and support and talk highly about the people that I think are doing great things, that have influenced me. And that stuff doesn't show up on social media. And quite frankly, I don't need the recognition for doing it because it's about the other person. One of the first things I did when I saw your post, I said, all right, let's get Dean on the podcast so we can promote your new business mentorship, because I think you're going to do it in a way that, as you described, is going to fill gaps. But I also sent a group message to Luca Hosvar and said, hey, Luca, get Dean back on your podcast. And Luca's like, hell yeah, it's been too long, right? Because I also know that Luca's got a great audience of coaches who, that's going to be a higher leverage thing. I think one of the most important skills, and I'm going to do a presentation on this for a future event, is understanding someone else's value system and understand how you can do things that support that person that is very high leverage. And I think the mistake a lot of people make is they'll come to you, and our DMs and our inboxes, email inbox are full of stuff where people are veiling an ask that only benefits them as if it's somehow a give and benefits you, but it really only benefits the asker. And it's so blatant at this point that I just immediately filter that stuff out. So it's actually refreshing when you find someone who's showing up and it's very clear that they just are abundant and want to do kind things for you. And I found that by doing that, the universe gives you back tenfold.
Yeah, karma is reciprocal, and it's something that I believe in. If you do good work, people will find it.
Now, the book. So what's the story with the book? And I guess like you said yes to that opportunity. Why was that important to you? Because that is a giant time-consuming thing. And a lot of people have written books. I was talking to Jason Brown at an event recently, and their advice to most trainers, don't write a book.
Mm-hmm. So I got contacted by Corey Van Wyck, who at that time was an acquisitions editor for Human Kinetics. And he's like, hey, we have this idea I'm kicking around. I want to get you involved in it. And brought me in. We were trying to find someone who was a doctor of physical therapy who could actually lend credence to the rehab side of things. So we brought in Dan Pope, who runs Fitness Pain Free. So we started working on this concept of a book that was sort of like or sort of like Supple Leopard meets actually training, meets actually figuring out what to do with training programs. So the goal on this is to find beat up meatheads like yourself and I who want to continue training and overcome injuries on our own. So if you have a sore shoulder, sore back, sore knee, sore hip, any of that kind of stuff, what does it actually mean? Do you need to get medical attention on it? Or is this something that you could just train around or adjust what you do in your daily life? Now, we can also talk about basic training philosophy and outlook. So it's something that's kind of a broad reaching book with a lot of content into it, but it essentially outlines myself and Dan's training philosophies, how we approach training different scenarios, and where we feel the best solutions could come from a really wide range of issues. So it's not meant to diagnose anything, but it's like, yeah, if your shoulder hurts when you do this, maybe try doing that. Is that okay? Cool. Now keep doing that. If it's not okay, now tag in a physio, a doctor, whoever you need to, but know when you need to do that kind of stuff versus just blanket, it hurts, don't do it, then what? We need to be able to give people some more options. So that old adage of what do I do when this happens? Well, it depends. We want to go into the it depends part and be able to help people understand what they need to do with training. So do you need to do corrective exercise. I call them level up drills, very much like Super Mario Brothers. You eat the mushroom, you get bigger. You take the star, you become invincible. So these aren't things that are corrective like you're broken or you're wrong. These are ways that you can access new things that you can do later on. We talk a lot about basic training exercises. So in a squat, do you need to squat with your feet forward, or can you take an asymmetric stance? We lay that all out. How do you adjust your grip on a bench press to make it so you get the best benefit? How do you switch from barbell to dumbbells? So all of these things we put into a book format. Now, the cool thing with this is that I've wanted to write a book forever. Since I
Mm.
started reading books, I wanted to write a book. And being able to get to an opportunity where it's presented in front of you and have somebody walk you through what actually is entailed in writing a book was part of what I wanted to get into. Because I can put words on paper, but writing a book is something that is a skill itself. So learning how to create an outline, learning how to create something that the editors will look at, learning how to go through step by step in the process. We signed the purchase agreement, or we signed the writing agreement in November 2022, and we're hoping to have the book on shelves November 2024. So
Okay.
it's not been a fast process, but it's been a process where we've had to go through step by step by step, write the manuscript, go through revisions. We're doing the photo shoot this weekend coming up, actually. From the time that this is released, we're going to do the photo shoot at Evolve downtown. Um, so I've got models coming in for that. I've got a photographer that we've set up. Dan Pope is coming into town for that. So we're going to have a whole bunch of things going on. I'm probably not going to sleep at all for that 4 days, 2 days before, 2 days after.
Mm.
So once that's all done, then we go through final layout, final revisions, and then it's off to the editor for a final copy and then publish. So the entire process is cool. And this isn't something where I'm expecting it to hit the New York Times bestseller and sell 10,000 copies or even 10 copies. I'm doing this entirely expecting $0 of revenue from it, but it's the experience to be able to say, here is a book with my name on it that I was able to do through a publisher. Now, if I sell more copies than zero, I'll be happy. So that's essentially my expectations going into it. Was the whole process was about being able to say, I'm a published author, and to have something at the end of that road that I could put on my bookshelf and give to clients and sign. So if I'm able to do that, the entire process was worth it from that perspective. Financially, I might make a mortgage payment out of it. I might make a Starbucks order out of it. I might buy a new house. I don't know. I don't care. The entire process was not about the money. It was about creating something, having something available, and leaving a legacy that way that I can actually upregulate the services around it and have something that's meaningful beyond.
Giving back to the industry that's been good to you. And it's not unlike you writing that first blog. So anybody who hasn't been reading your blog, you can go back a little bit. It's good. I know that you have one blog along the way somewhere where you documented everything you did, and you said, quote, and I didn't know what I was doing. Like everything along the way of your career has, I'd say most of it certainly has struck gold. There's probably some stuff along the way you decide, okay, that doesn't align with me. That didn't pay off. That wasn't worth it. And you just move on from it, right? I think we all do.
Yeah, my
But
own podcast. I used to have a podcast too. I think I made it to like 10 episodes, and then I was like, I don't like this. I'm going to stop.
yeah, I remember you had Ben Mikulski on.
Yeah. Actually, no, I was on his
Oh,
podcast.
yes, my bad. You were on his. And so Ben is going to be one of the speakers at the event this year that we're doing here in Edmonton. So look, I'll actually see him in Toronto for CanFit Pro because I'm speaking at the CanFit Pro Global Conference August 9th and 10th. I'm going to shout that anybody who's going to be in the Toronto area. That's actually a really cool event. Me, Lee Boyce, Nick Shaw, Ben Pekulski, Melody Schoenfeld will all be there. And Lee and Melody wrote a book as well, not dissimilar from what you have done there. And I
Yeah.
think, I mean, if someone has the bandwidth and the expertise to write a book, I mean, I think it is probably the pinnacle of authority in our world. You get books like Nick Winkelman's The Language of Coaching is one of my favorites. I think it's an exceptional book, or I've got a big bookshelf full of this stuff. Let me come up with one more. Like Mike Boyle, Advances in Functional Training is one of my favorite training books, right? These are great books. So I'm excited for it. I'll be reading it. The copy will be sitting on my shelf, just like all the rest of this stuff. And you have a seminar coming up with our friend Dr. Sam Spinelli here in Edmonton right away.
Yep, that's in June 6th. You were actually at the last one that we did back in 2018.
Loved it.
Yeah, and that's going to be a barbell sports workshop where we go. It's a one-day workshop in Edmonton at Hannah's new place, the strength headquarters on the west end of town. We wanted to do it there because we could shut the place down, turn off the music, not have additional members walking through. Nothing against anywhere else that we've taught that workshop, but we needed the equipment, we needed the space, we needed the setup. So Sam and I go through a really good in-depth overview on how to actually coach, how to actually train the barbell lift. So squat, bench, deadlift, snatch, jerk. But then we also dig into things like common injuries, common problems, how to program around different things. So in one day, you're going to take a huge amount of information away from it. So this is open for trainers, therapists, also average gym goers if you want to dig deeper into this kind of stuff. So the information for that is on my Instagram. I'm also going to put it up on my website. So if you're in Edmonton and want to do a 1 day intensive with somebody who's a doctor and also somebody who's just a meathead, that's me and Sam. We'll be able to run it.
Sam's one of my favorite people in the industry. One of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. One of the smartest. He's what, 6'5" and strong in a way that humans shouldn't be strong. It's actually silly his capability for force production, and yet just a really gentle, thoughtful soul. And I also love his attitude towards the intersection of physical therapy and strength training. And physical therapy is sort of a bit of a battleground on social media these days, as is almost anything. And you have a tribe, and I get along with some of them, and some of them are idiots, a tribe of like what I would call, the hardcore evidence-based crowd who really police, what is said on the internet about it. But the thing is, I've actually learned a ton from them. There's some really smart people in that camp, but they also tend to be a little bit warlike with anybody who says anything that they think is outdated. And they sometimes pick on some foundational figures who maybe, you know, for whatever reason, they just decided they're going to zero in on them. And I find that Sam doesn't play that game. Sam is great at creating helpful information in a very positive light. Like I've seen him once, like debunk and go after another figure who deserved it. That was a while ago. But outside of that, he's really my favorite person to direct people to as a resource, as someone who understands the value of strength training as an intersection with injury rehabilitation, physical therapy, and the fact that he is a doctor of physical therapy and he has that.
Absolutely. But he's also not afraid to punch up and go after those big figures either. Like I've seen him go after Stu McGill and be like, hey, this is not right based on your own science, based on these kind of things. And he does it in a way that's very professional and very thoughtful and not going for just cheap clicks or likes. Recently, he did the same thing with Huberman, which was fantastic. And I think it's something that's going to lead to something down the road for him, which is great because they need to get his opinion on things because he is so smart. He's done the research, he's looked at the research, and he's able to say, this is what the standard of care actually is.
Yeah, I saw, I think in a story that Huber Bennett replied to him and may pull him on a podcast, which is incredible. It's actually really rewarding to see people from our universe getting these opportunities. I believe you know Joel Jameson, at least you know of Joel. Joel's a good friend. I love what Joel does. And
Mhm.
Joel, because of the success with his heart rate variability stuff and his Morpheus device, Peter Attia loves it. So he was
Mhm.
invited to come on Peter Attia. And I don't know if that episode's been aired yet, but the leverage of an opportunity like that. And your book, who knows? Who knows at what point that a Huberman or an Attia or a Chris Williamson or someone, because Dr. Mike Israetel, who you've done, an event together with,
Mhm.
has been, their YouTube is crushing it, but he's been platformed multiple times by Chris Williamson, right? So there are people in our universe who are leaning in, creating these opportunities, and you know, you never know what can happen from it. That's kind of the theme of this episode. Let's
Yeah.
respect your time. If you had any more thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them. And then I want people to know where to find you.
Yeah, a big thing is that when you listen to everything that we've talked about for anybody who's tuning into this, is that everyone who's had these opportunities or done these great things didn't wait for them to happen. They didn't wait for the opportunity to present itself. They did something to cause the change. So they went to an event, they put out a product, they put out content, they started creating thoughtful discourse within an environment. They didn't, like Sam Spinelli didn't wait for Huberman to reach out to him. Sam created content that caught Huberman's eye that allowed him to say, oh, this guy might know what he's talking about. Joel Jameson didn't wait for people to come to him with his HRV stuff. He put out content for probably, like, I remember seeing him putting out content about 15 years ago about HRV. He's been studying this for a long time. I've used some of the content with HRV in my own clumsy manner. I don't understand it as fully as he does, but I've tried it and I've tried to work it into the program, but I'm just not there as far as how I view it compared to how he views it. And part of that could just be due to the fact that he works with a different clientele than I work with and gets a greater benefit. Cool. He's way smarter at it, and I'm just not using it effectively enough as he is. But he's getting the opportunities because he's put out that content for 15 years. You're on episode 300 plus of your podcast, which means that you've been doing this for so long and getting the opportunities to come from it. Imagine if you had decided, well, I want to go speak at all these different events, and you had no reference behind you or no history of stuff that you've done. It would be hard for anybody to take you seriously. So you have to make your path. You can't just wait for somebody to say you're good or you're valuable. You have to get out in front of people and put that content out there in one way or another. You have to develop the program. You have to develop the product. You have to make yourself be seen. It's not something that's just enough to be hoping that people view you. You have to get there. You have to do the work. There's no substitution for it.
And all the events, no, not all, most of the events that I've spoken at, I actually attended first. I showed up. And for Tim Ernst's event, the Inland Empire Fitness Conference, I don't often tell people this, but it's important. When he came around to ask me to become a speaker, because Greg Knuckles wasn't able to appear in 2021. Thank you, Greg. You started that career for me. I tried to turn Tim down. I tried to deflect it. I say, hey, why don't you circle back to Lee Boyce? Why don't you vote? And he's like, no, I want you. So I said yes. And when I asked you about like how you lean into skill development, I've always believed in like be as proactive as possible at skill development. Writing for sure is one of my favorite ones. But when opportunities are presented to you, and if you maybe they scare you a little bit, don't disappoint the person who's given the opportunity. Really lean hard into it. My first thing I did was I texted Luca and I said, what books you got on public speaking? Right. And I devoured them and it worked out okay. And I've worked on that skill too. Dean, appreciate having you here. Where should people find you? Instagram, D Somerset 1, I believe.
Yep, that's it. My blog, deansomerset.com. I haven't updated it in a long time. I got to start doing something on that. You can also just email me, dean@deansomerset.com. If you have anything that I can help you out with, happy to help out where I can, or at least direct you to where is the best opportunity.
Good. And well, thank you again. And for everybody listening, I appreciate you sticking right to the end. I know I've been not as consistent with weekly episodes, juggling everything. I am working on being as consistent as possible, making sure these are great episodes. And I still want to grow it. I still want to make sure this is reaching more people, helping more coaches. Take this, put it in the hands of one person, one coach you know would benefit from learning about Dean's work. And if you want to, if you're finding this through Dean's media and you haven't listened to my stuff before, we talked about Sam Spinelli. He's been a guest in the past. Cycle back, look for Sam's episode. I've had Joel talking about heart rate variability on here before. Cycle back. I'm going to bring him on again soon. And I've got a lot of other great guests, so maybe you'll stick around. Anyway, thanks. And I should have something for you guys next week, so stay tuned.